Here we are again at the end of another adventure. Or at least for you, the adventure has yet to start. This is also not all the loot, either. You see, the void always provides. I have a corporation mate who has spent far too much time staring into wormholes, calling them the void. With the way this one went, it sure was, but it provided in the end. I wish I could say I just go out for an hour or two and come back with hundreds of millions. If this had been the start of the adventure, that sure would have been the case. No, in fact, this was my 4th time in as many days going out, and unlike all the other times. This one time, I found some decent loot. That is, however, the fun of exploration. The wild spikes of finding nothing as you discover yourself trailing behind another explorer. Possible death if you are not paying attention to those who spend all day camping at exploration sites. There is also that thrill of, is the next signature I'm going to scan down going to make me rich or be a disappointment? This is one of those adventures where I went everywhere and then some. I use Wander to track my exploration route, and it is set up for wormholes, so things like low security and null security don't always show up unless I'm connecting to a wormhole, which is why some areas have no connections. That, however, was not everything. This also highlights the fun part of using wormholes to get around. If I'm not finding anything of interest, I just have to wait a day, and suddenly I have a whole new range of areas not that far away. There were also many times when I went out that everything was end of life, which is the risk of exploring this way. So, there ended up being a 3rd set on my map as old routes disappeared and I found new wormholes as well. Things at least started decently, other than the Class 1 being close to the end of its life. So my time in here had to be limited. I ended up finding a ruined Sandshaw relic site to run. While I was off flying towards that, like I do many times, I was closing in on a possible 2nd site to run.
Warp drive active.
This first site ended up having some decent loot. I even looted a Tier 2 rig blueprint copy to use some of the materials on for some further profit. While I would not be getting everything I'd need for its 2 runs, this adventure was not that far off. That data site I was scanning down did not pan out. The other wormhole in here was also end of life. Not wanting to overstay my welcome, I went back to check in on a few other wormholes I had marked out. The nice thing about the way I enjoy exploration is that I'm already dropping off a batch of loot, while I had intended to keep it all together till I was done with this one. Since things went on for a few days, I ended up using or selling a bunch. So instead, we will just have to settle for me showing fresh loot totals. As I just end up moving everything out of the container, I was keeping tabs on when I used any of it. My favorite time of day is letting me down with endless end-of-life wormholes. Sometimes you just need to call it a night or move on to doing other things. This system did have some gas sites to run. While I was kind of tempted to do so, I ended up being a little lazy. Sometime later, I find myself in a Class 2 wormhole that has a static Class 3 and high security. It ended up having a few other sites besides this blood data site. Some of them were not so great. At least this time around, I'm somewhere that has guaranteed wormholes to take me elsewhere. It really felt like the first container of the site took forever. Hacking these things is not on top of my priority list of what I'm paying attention to. As with any first site, if someone is waiting around for an explorer like me to show up, I'll discover quite quickly, as they usually can't even hold themselves off long enough for you to make it to the first container before dropping combat probes or doing other things. While there could be someone in there at the time I was working on this site, things were quiet on my end. While that sight was not that great, I'd take sights like that all day long over empty space and a whole lot of nothing.
Warp drive active.
I wish all exploration sites looked as amazing as the rogue drones do. It's even tempting to turn graphics up to full settings. The other wormhole I ended up checking out ended up being a total bust. It also had a high security static. I was lucky to have found a few sites in the first place. Not an insane loot stack going. There were, however, things in here I was glad to get to save me a trip to Jeddah to buy. It was starting to look like this Class 1 wormhole had nothing for me. As it would turn out, that is exactly what it had. I've had many say I'm lucky. Sometimes you just have to keep going. This system ended up having a wormhole into a Class 4. Class 4 had an entry point into null security. Null security ended up being a total bust. I ended up in quite an active place. While it was clear anywhere running combat sites. After checking a couple of systems out, I decided to leave before I was shown the door. You might be wondering why I'm docked up with no loot. That is because I found nothing. While I did find a site I could have run, there were some fishy things going on that made me nope right out of the situation. It's run like these which is lame, but they do happen. The best you can do is just go right back out a little later and hope for a better ending. I was once again being taunted by some gas sites. It was, however, just a Class 1. Thankfully, after far too many letdowns in this class, I found a site. There ended up being multiple high-security connections. Once I realized that it was time to move on. I'm shocked I did not find more activity in this one.
Warp drive active.
After jumping in and out of a couple of other chains, I was in yet another class, and it would end up having two things for me. One being this relic site, and the second being another wormhole to check out. I don't know why, but anytime I see those trigger units pop up in loot, my eyes do a double take. Only 17 million out of this one, with the bulk of it coming from the triggers. It's a shame I don't have a wider use for them. I ended up selling quite a few, as Tier 2 rig manufacturing is not really my thing.
Warp drive active.
Just when I was having fun being all alone, up pops combat probes before I even make it to the first container in the site. At least I ended up getting some sights out of this place. I kind of had a feeling this place might have some activity with some strange things I was finding on D-scan before this occurred. Nice thing when this happens. I just jump out of the chain I'm in and go into another one.
Warp drive. Warp drive active.
Most of the containers were not that great in this one. At least you just need one or two to make up for most sites. I jumped into null security. Noticed these people had an insane amount of combat sites up. Despite that, they had very few sites that needed to be scanned down. A couple of quick looks around, and it was the best I left in one piece. Up till this part in the adventure, quite a few of the wormholes I plundered for what little loot they would give. Felt rather poor. This just goes to show you, even these more normal sites, if you get a couple decent ones back to back, they add up quickly. It's been way too long since I found a single normal site that had this kind of loot.
Warp drive active.
Before I knew it, I was back dropping off some loot. I was close enough to head back out before going on further exploring. I felt while not. Kill boards showed way more explorers getting killed in some of the places I'd been and would be going to.
Warp drive active.
I really do just want to AFK and spend hours looking at these drone sites. Anytime I land in a site, and I've not been in the wormhole long, where some containers have already been hacked, I get out of that site and go looking around. Best I can tell, someone was just cherry picking and they were long gone. Just to play it safe, I never returned to this site. I don't know if the cherry picker explorer was going to be coming back for this, was long gone, or waiting in wait, hoping someone like me would go get themselves blown up and take the loot. I, however, was not about to pass up a ghost site. I swear, these sites like showing up when there is a chance of others being around. Since my Anathema won't survive any damage from a ghost site, I do my usual, get as close as I can, cloaked up. Then drop the cloak and wait out a short timer before I can lock a target to start hacking it. After every container, I reassess the situation. If it's time to bail or possibly dump loot into a container. Since I suspect someone had recently been here, the last thing I wanted to do was leave lots of loot in a container, so I'd be bailing out if I loot anything decent. Almost 40 million in loot out of the first container. Nothing massive like I was hoping for. I decided it was time to move on to another one. Now that is more of what I'm talking about. I had no idea what a nano-regulation was for, but for an almost 400 million container, that is enough to put a smile on my face. At this point, for whatever reason, my hands were quite shaking. I've learned that pressing your luck after hacking 2 containers in a ghost site is usually not that smart. So, I decided this is good enough to get out. Just for fun, I jumped back in and the rats were already there. They already blew up the containers. I'm glad I got out when I did. While the end loot is not showing everything I got during this adventure, it ended up being around 725 million in loot, which worked out to about 131 million per hour. Not a crazy amount, but if it was not for that last container, it would been a lot less. Thank you for making it to the end. I hope you have a great week. Consider dropping a like and subscribing if you wish to see more content like this.